Picture a man in chains. Not a criminal, not a monster, just a man. Standing in the dirt of a training yard somewhere in southern Italy, under a burning sun, surrounded by walls he did not choose, and guards he did not consent to. He has a name. He has a past. He was a soldier once, a free man, a husband, and now he is property. Bought, branded, owned. His name is Spartacus, and in a few months, that name will make the entire Roman Empire afraid to sleep. This is his story. The truth is, we do not know everything about Spartacus. He left no writings, no monuments, no coins with his face on them. The Romans who wrote about him were his enemies, and even they could not hide their reluctant respect. What we know is this: Spartacus was a Thracian, born somewhere in the wild hill country of what is now Bulgaria and northern Greece. Thrace was not part of Rome. It was a land of warriors, of tribes, of men who grew up hunting in the mountains and fighting before they could read. At some point, and the details are disputed, Spartacus ended up in Roman hands. Some ancient sources say he had served in the Roman auxiliary forces as an allied soldier, that he had fought for Rome, that Rome had used him, and then enslaved him anyway. Whether that is true or legend, it tells us something. This was not a man who had never known freedom. This was a man who had tasted it and had it taken away. That is a very different kind of anger. He was sold to a gladiatorial school in Capua, a ludus, a training facility owned by a man named Gnaeus Lentulus Batiatus. The ludus at Capua was one of the most prestigious gladiatorial schools in Italy, which means it was also one of the most brutal. Men were trained there to fight and die for the entertainment of Roman crowds. They were fed well, kept strong, trained to a razor's edge, and they were not free. They lived under constant guard. They slept in cells. They trained until their bodies gave out, and then trained some more. Spartacus was good at it. More than good. He had something the other men noticed. A quality that is hard to name, but impossible to miss. He was calm in a way that dangerous men rarely are. He thought when others reacted. He planned when others panicked. And he talked to people. He listened to them. He learned their languages. There were men from a dozen different cultures inside that school. Gauls and Germans and Greeks and Syrians and Africans. Men who had nothing in common except their chains. Spartacus found the thing they all shared: the desire to be free. In 73 BC, Spartacus helped organize a breakout. The original plan was bigger. Perhaps 200 men were involved, but the plot was discovered before it could fully unfold. Only about 78 gladiators managed to escape, fighting their way out of the school with kitchen knives and whatever tools they could grab from the cookhouse. 78 men against Rome. They ran to Mount Vesuvius, the great volcano looming over the Bay of Naples. They climbed its slopes and set up camp in the crater at the top, using the natural walls of the mountain as their fortress. Rome sent a force after them, a militia. Not even a proper Roman legion, just a hastily assembled group of soldiers under a commander named Gaius Claudius Glaber. Glaber set up a blockade at the only path up the mountain. He sat down to wait. He assumed the slaves would starve. He did not know Spartacus. Spartacus looked at the mountain. He looked at the wild grapevines growing on the slopes. He had his men weave the vines into ropes, long, strong ropes. And then he led his men over the rim of the crater on the far side of the volcano, down a cliff face that Glaber had left completely unguarded because he assumed it was impassable. They descended in the dark. They circled around behind Glaber's camp, and they destroyed it. The Romans barely knew what hit them. Word spread fast. In the countryside of southern Italy, there were slaves everywhere. On the great agricultural estates, the latifundia, tens of thousands of men and women worked the land in conditions of grinding misery. When they heard that a gladiator had broken free and was holding his own against Rome, they ran toward that fire. Spartacus's force swelled from 78 to thousands, then tens of thousands. Rome sent a proper force next, 2 praetors with legions. Spartacus defeated them both. He defeated them using terrain, using deception, using the kind of tactics that a formally trained Roman general would have spent years in military school learning. Where had a Thracian gladiator learned to outmaneuver Roman legions? The Romans asked that question and found no comfortable answer. By the winter of 73 BC, Spartacus commanded an army that some ancient sources estimate at over 70,000 people. Spartacus turned south again, perhaps to regroup, perhaps because he had lost the route north, perhaps because he could not abandon the people who had followed him into this. The war went on. For 2 more years, Spartacus fought the Roman legions to a standstill. He won battle after battle. He humiliated Roman commanders. At one point, he defeated and killed 2 consular armies in a single season, an achievement that would have earned a Roman general a triumph. Rome was terrified, not just of losing, of what it meant. If slaves could fight like this, if they could organize, strategize, defeat legions, then the entire foundation of Roman civilization was in danger. Rome ran on slave labor. Every Roman household, every Roman farm, every Roman mine and workshop depended on it. If Spartacus showed that those people could fight back, truly fight back, then what happened next? Rome gave the command to Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in the world, the man who would later partner with Julius Caesar, a man who understood that this war had to end, and end in a way that sent a message so brutal that no slave would ever consider rising again. Crassus took 8 legions and pursued Spartacus south into the toe of Italy, the region of Bruttium. He built a wall, an actual wall, stretching from sea to sea across the narrowest part of the Italian peninsula, nearly 60 kilometers long, lined with trenches and stakes. He trapped Spartacus against the sea. Spartacus had planned to cross to Sicily, to use the island as a base, to keep the rebellion alive. He made a deal with Cilician pirates to ferry his army across the strait. The pirates took his money and sailed away. Spartacus was trapped. He tried to break through Crassus's wall. He failed. He tried again. He failed again. A portion of his army broke through a 3rd attempt but scattered. And then Pompey arrived from Spain with his legions, cutting off any escape to the north. Spartacus was surrounded. And he knew it. What happened next is one of the most extraordinary moments in the ancient world. Spartacus's horse was brought to him before the final battle. He drew his sword, and he killed it. He told his men, "If we win, I will have all the horses I want. If we lose, I will not need one." There would be no retreat. He led his men personally into the thickest part of the fighting. The ancient sources say he was trying to reach Crassus himself, to end it on his own terms, man to man, sword against the richest man in Rome. He killed 2 centurions who stood in his way. He was wounded. He fell to one knee. He kept fighting from the ground. And then he was gone, swallowed by the battle. His body was never identified, never found. 6,000 survivors of the rebellion were crucified along the Appian Way, the great road from Capua to Rome. 1 cross every 40 meters, for 120 miles. Crassus wanted the road to speak. He wanted every traveler who walked from the south toward Rome to understand what resistance cost. But here is what Crassus could not control. The name. Spartacus could not be crucified because they could not find him. His body was gone. His story was not. 2,000 years later, his name is still spoken, still written, still carried by people who have never set foot in Italy, who have never seen Mount Vesuvius, who were born in worlds he could not have imagined. Leaders of revolutions have taken his name. Philosophers have written about him. Generals have studied his campaigns. Karl Marx called him his favorite hero from ancient history, the man he most admired, a slave. Spartacus never won. He never crossed the Alps. He never got his people home. And yet, he is remembered, not because of what he achieved, but because of what he refused. He refused to accept the world as it was given to him. He refused to believe that the circumstances of his birth, the chains, the brand, the cell, the training yard, were the final word on who he was. He looked at an empire that had decided he was property. And he said no. 5 lessons from the life of Spartacus. Lesson 1. Circumstances are not permanent. Spartacus began the most famous slave rebellion in history with 78 men and kitchen knives. He had no army, no money, no weapons, no land. He had nothing except the refusal to accept his situation as permanent. The conditions you are in right now are real. They are not forever. Lesson 2. Find the thing that connects people and lead from there. Spartacus built an army out of people who spoke different languages, came from different cultures, and had never met before their chains brought them together. He did not lead them through fear. He led them by finding the one thing they all shared, and making that the center of everything. Every great leader in history has done exactly this. Lesson 3. Discipline is what separates a movement from a mob. Spartacus could have let his army burn Italy to the ground. Other leaders in his coalition wanted to. He held the line. He shared plunder equally. He executed men who committed atrocities. He understood that power without discipline destroys itself from the inside. The hardest thing to control in any uprising, in any organization, in any team, is your own people. That is always the first test of leadership. Lesson 4. Betrayal will come from unexpected places. The pirates took Spartacus's money and sailed away. His own coalition split when he needed unity most. The plan that almost worked, crossing the Alps, reaching freedom, fell apart not because of Rome, but because of internal fracture. Build trust carefully. Verify before you depend. And have a second plan ready, always. Lesson 5. You do not have to win to matter. Spartacus lost. His rebellion was crushed. His army was crucified along 120 miles of road. And 2,000 years later, the world still knows his name. What you fight for, and how you fight for it, can outlast the outcome. Not every story ends in victory. Some stories end in something more durable than victory. They end in meaning. Spartacus killed his horse before the final battle so he could not run. He fought from the ground with a wound in his leg. He was never found, and he was never forgotten. This has been Legends of the Ancient World, an Alivinci University History Channel production.